Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lincoln Lancaster County Planning Commission of May 10th, 2017. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted inside the doors at the back of the room. If you parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, the gate is open and no parking coupons are necessary. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, commissioners and staff, cell phone usage is not permitted in these chambers during any portion of this meeting, and we appreciate your cooperation. The Planning Commission action is final on the following items: 1.3, special permit number 17011, 4.1, special permit number 17010. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or to the County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held April 26, 2017. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Harris?
Second, Edgerton.
Thank you. Jerry, please call the vote.
Beckius,
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Shear,
Yes.
Hove.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Jerry to read all the consent agenda items into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda.
Microphone's not on.
Yes, it is. Oh, sorry. Like the green light was on. All other items on the consent agenda, let's see, where am I here? All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Jerry, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
Thank you. Prior to calling the consent agenda items, if there's anyone present today that had planned on testifying on agenda items 5.1A, County Change of Zone, number 17005, or item 5.1B, County Preliminary Plat, number 17003, located at Southwest 98th Street, 1 mile south of West Yankee Hill Road. Both applications have been withdrawn by the applicant, and therefore there will be no public hearing on those items today. So I just wanted to make that announcement. Okay, going with the consent agenda. Item 1.1 is comprehensive plan conformance number 17007 to review as to conformance with the 2040 Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan, a request to declare property as surplus generally located at 7701 Gray Cliff Drive. Item 1.2 is comprehensive plan amendment number 17001 to amend the 2040 Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan and the future land use maps to add the Upper Wagon Train Watershed Master Plan to the list of sub-area plans in the plan realization section of the comprehensive plan, and to amend the Lincoln area and Lancaster County future land use maps to have the future land use designations be consistent with the proposed flood-prone areas. The final item under consent is item 1.3, special permit number 17011 for the removal of existing storage buildings and construction of a garage on property generally located at 4201 North 63rd Street. Again, this is final action on this special permit unless appealed to the City Council within 14 days of today's action. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these consent agenda items?
I see none.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak on any of these consent agenda items? If so, please stand and state that item.
Doesn't appear to be. I entertain a motion.
I move the consent agenda be approved.
Second, Core.
Jerry, please call the vote.
Beckius,
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Shear,
Yes.
Hove.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
There are no requests for deferral, so we will now proceed to public hearings. The staff will make a brief presentation. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak, unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes, then you will have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Jerry, please call the first public hearing item.
Okay, under special permit is item 4.1, special permit number 17010 for an indoor kennel with an outdoor area that permits more than 3 animals at a time on property generally located at 222 North 44th Street. Again, this is final action by the Planning Commission unless appealed to the City Council. Staff recommendation is for conditional approval, and I would note for the record that I did receive 2 letters of support, one from Thomas Roper and one from Mandy LeMay with New Image Salon. So I just wanted to mention that. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these application or on this application?
I see none.
George Wesselhoff, Planning Department. So the general location where we're at, this is north of O Street on the east side of North 44th Street, near Q Street. And I would mention that in 2015, this property, along with the lot to the north, these properties were rezoned from H2 Highway Business District to B3 Commercial District in order to meet the off-street parking requirements for commercial use. And at that time, the applicant proposed an indoor dog park, daycare, kennel use for Lot 2 of McGinnis Addition. So this application is for a special permit to allow the outdoor area associated with the use to have more than 3 animals at one time. Kennel facilities are a conditional use in the B3 district, and there are 2 conditions that any associated outdoor area must follow. One is that they must not be located any closer than 200 feet from any R1 through R8 residential district, and the other is that they're not to have more than 3 animals permitted in the outdoor area at any one time. If either of these 2 conditions cannot be met, they can apply for a special permit. So the applicant is proposing in this case up to 30 animals in the outdoor area, which the outdoor area would be located on the far east side of the property. Sure.
Someone's app.
Steve, we have an issue over here.
No, it's an application on a phone.
Thank you.
So the outdoor area would be located on the far east side of the property, which is approximately 275 feet from the nearest residential district to the west, where there are apartments located. The special permit criteria under the special permit section for kennel, there are 5 conditions, that the first of which is that the outdoor area and fences must meet the setbacks of the zoning district. The second is that the outdoor areas shall be screened from the ground to 6 feet with an opaque fence or wall. The third is that the use of the outdoor areas shall be restricted between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. The fourth is that the animals in the outdoor areas shall be under the supervision of handlers at all times. And then also that the Planning Commission may limit the number of animals allowed in the outdoor area at any one time. So in this case, the special permit application would meet all these conditions with the request for the commission approval of up to the 30 animals. So in this case, the primary issue potentially would be the noise associated with the barking dogs. Health Department did review this, and the challenge is how to quantify the noise as far as whether it's 20 dogs or 30 dogs. And so the issue of quantifying the noise factor from the barking dogs was reviewed, but the health department does not object to the approval of this special permit. But at the same time, they do note that the applicant will be required to comply with the Lincoln Municipal Code as far as offensive odors for enclosures in which animals are kept, and also the animal noise provisions. And those provisions are listed in the staff report. In addition, one of the specific site conditions associated with the proposal in the report is that in the event of repeated violations of the animal noise provisions, the special permit may be revoked. And we do have a member of the health department, a person from the health department here today that can speak more specifically as far as enforcement for animal provisions.
Any questions for George?
Is there a process in place for the health department or the planning department to monitor noise level?
I would defer to the health department on that question.
Good afternoon. Steve Beal, Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department Manager of Lincoln Animal Control. Our monitoring of barking dogs and noise usually boils down to the complaints that we get. And it's driven largely by that. We have a process on how we handle those from the very get-go when we get a complaint all the way through to repeated offenses and a procedure for making sure that we do our job, which is what George said, to enforce the Lincoln Municipal Code, Chapter 6, part of the animals, barking dogs.
And so with this, there is a revocation. It could be revoked if there was too many complaints or if there were issues with that.
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
So is it different for a kennel? Is it different than, for instance, if you were just kind of a regular homeowner and, you know, you have a dog in the neighborhood that's bothering you and you call in a complaint, you know, I think the procedure is that after the complaint has been filed, enough complaints, I don't know how many, but someone will come out, and then at that time, they have to observe the nuisance for the complaint to register or have validity or whatever, any fines be imposed. Is it similar for a kennel that you have to observe the nuisance in place? Or is it enough to just have enough?
We need to have enough evidence that if we write a citation, it's going to be able to be prosecuted effectively if there truly is a violation. But yes, those things that you mentioned are part of the process. So if you're a homeowner and you have a neighbor that calls in about your dog barking, we're going to send that owner of the barking dog a letter indicating that animal control had received a complaint. We would do the same thing here with the owner or the responsible party. We'd send a letter. The idea would be to work with that individual to get the dog to stop barking, or in this case, if it was multiple dogs, that they get that situation under control and it's no longer a noise problem. If they have 10 days to correct that problem, if after 10 days there's still an issue or we receive repeated complaints, we're going to send an animal control officer out there. We may do that right away, but generally we send a letter initially and try and work with. We also send a letter to the complainant indicating that we're acknowledging that they have complained and that we've contacted the owner. So if that goes nowhere then, and what you mentioned about observing it, if an animal control officer goes out there and they hear the barking and it's excessive, and in our Title VI chapter of the Animal Control Ordinance is excessive, you know, dogs are going to bark at some things, but this is a barking that would be persistent, maybe 15 minutes or more. And then the officer would possibly, they'd have an option of writing a warning or a citation at that point.
I have another question. If a permit is issued under these conditions, can the conditions be changed because of complaint? So could it go at that time from 30 to 20, 20 to 10, or once the permit is issued, is that the end of the conversation and then we wait for citations?
I'm not aware that the special permit conditions as approved by the commission can be changed without going back to the commission.
And just to follow up on that, what would be, so it says here that the planning commission may limit the number of animals at any one time, but what would be the procedure leading up to that change? Would that be neighbor-driven, or would it be driven by you, or how does that come to us?
Under the scenario that the special permit is revoked,
Or just that there would be a scenario where the number of outside animals would be lowered? Like, what would kind of petition that to come before us?
I don't know if other than the applicant, if there could be an outside application to that effect or not. I guess I'm not sure.
I don't think the health department would have any role in that. We would certainly collaborate with the planning department on whatever we needed to do. But I will say this about the number of dogs, and George referenced that when he introduced this. And it's difficult to put, some sort of is 10 too many, 20 too many, 30 too many. I think really what's going to have to happen here is there's going to have to be enough dog handlers, if you will, out in the play area or the pool area, managing this, so if the barking becomes excessive, they can nip it in the bud, and that's what it's going to boil down to. And I've read in here that there's going to be some number of staff out there in that outdoor area. So it's difficult to say, if it would come back, whether 20 dogs would be more or less of a problem.
Steve Hendrickson with the Planning Department. Just to clarify, you have two places basically where you can limit the number of dogs today. So you could, based on testimony, decide to have it be limited to 20, 10, some other number, or deny the special permit altogether. The second circumstance would be a fairly rare one, which is there's enough complaints about the handling, people are not following the conditions of a special permit, be it any special permit, that it is then taken back through the process to be revoked. And during that process, then potentially you could determine, you recommend that it either be revoked or you recommend that the number at that point be reduced. Again, that would be assuming that it would be going back through the process, either forwarded by the planning department that we think there's been enough case that it shows, or the applicant voluntarily decides to go forward with that. In this case, we did specifically want to include that as a condition to make it very clear that this is going forward, but while all special permits can be revoked, that in this case, because it was kind of difficult to judge what was this actually going to be the impact, wanted that noted very specifically that if there's repeated violations of this, and we would include in that, I would note, if you read the text itself on page 4 of the staff report, which is also page 44 of the agenda, it lists the actual section 6.04.435 animal noise, and we are taking it to mean that that section will apply even if they get a licensed veterinarian on the site. That this is a special permit for kennel and outdoor dog use. Simply hiring a veterinarian to be on the site would not exempt you then from this potentially being cited under this section. Normally you would be protected as a veterinarian, but in this case we're saying the special permit here as a kennel, we want to make it clear that if you continue to violate the noise disturbance, that could mean you could have your special permit revoked.
And there's no way for the applicant to get an exemption like that of any kind. This is permanent.
What I'm saying is that there are other zoning districts that don't require the special permit. So let's say you're downtown in the B4. If you are a veterinarian, I read this that it does not apply to you, and I'm assuming that's what the health department would note.
Again, the intent here, as I understand it, is a business premise for a licensed vet. So I think of that as the 40 or so local veterinarians that we have in the city of Lincoln that, may have more than 3 dogs, may have them in an outdoor area at times, with the primary purpose of their business to service a vet to the customers they they take care of.
Any other questions? Tom?
George, the staff report mentions prior special permits for kennels. Do you have any additional historical context on those 3 permits that were specifically identified in the staff report?
Right, we looked at recent special permits for kennels just to see if there were any that were approved with more than 3 animals. That was kind of the focus of the research. In all 3 of those cases, they were not allowed to have more than 3 animals at a time.
Okay. I'm assuming that you're investigating the number 30 because that's what the applicant is asking for. Is that correct? In terms of the number of animals on the special permit?
Correct. Maybe to expand in my response, so in some of those other cases, they were requesting a waiver from the setback or from the 200-foot provision, if you will.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a follow-up. On any of those other kennels that you researched, in which zoning district were they located?
Boy, off the top of my head, I think at least 1 or 2 of them was commercial, but
Okay.
not quite sure on all 3.
I have some idea of where a couple of those kennels are, and I'm just curious what their zoning was. And I'm curious about the number of complaints that may have come in from those establishments.
I can speak to that to some extent. On some of the larger boarding kennels in Lincoln, we kind of broke the ice with this a few years back when Camp Bow Wow was one of the first kennels to come into Lincoln and operate. Now, there's since been other businesses that have come in, and I can say I looked before I came to the meeting. We've had no complaints, noise complaints, at any of these facilities that I'm aware of or that we have on record.
That are in town.
In town, in the city limits. Animal control only has jurisdiction in the city limits.
Anyone else? Thanks, gentlemen. Applicant?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Christy Schroff, 300 North 44th Street, Suite 116. I'm the attorney for the applicant. And I'm also a neighbor. Looking out of my office window on 44th Street, it's been very exciting for me to see the construction and the revitalization of a building that has sat vacant for 6 years. 2 years ago, you heard from the same applicant when we came in for the zone change request, as George mentioned. At that time, we told you about plans. It's been 2 years in the planning process, so later you will hear from Leon Kilmer, the CEO, who will address some of these questions that have come up as to what the plans are. But that time you unanimously approved the zone change request, and some of you then said that you believed this was a really good use for this property. As George explained, presently kennels are allowed right now in B3, and so the only question really is the number of animals, and I would note that the testimony of the health department and what they have said have approved it. We will Leon will explain why 30, how we arrived at that. Also, we would note that one of the conditions is to have a handler outside at any given time when they're out there. With an investment approaching nearly $3 million on this property, the applicant has decided to request through this special permit, though, that animals up to 30 be allowed at any one time in the outdoor area. I would note that all of the conditions of the conditional approval that was recommended by the planning staff report are acceptable, and the applicant does intend to comply with all of those conditions. I would also like to submit a letter. This is apropos to what we were just talking about, and that is businesses located next door to doggy daycares. This is a favorable letter from a business that is right next door to Woof Doggy Daycare. And because this wasn't submitted before right now, could I just read applicable portions? Although we're able occasionally to hear the dogs making sounds, our customers find it enjoyable and soothing to know that they are cared for in a professional manner rather than being left home alone and unattended. We find in no way does their business harm or even hinder our business or neighborhood. This is from the owner of Gray's Keg Salon at 104 North 20th Street, and they're right next door to the Woof Doggy Daycare, and I would submit that for the record.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned, CEO Leon Kilmer will talk about plans for daycare, reasons why we're asking for up to 30, and the procedures that have already been established to deal with noise and odors. So if you have other questions too, we would also note that architect Don Schleining is here, and he can answer any other questions that you might have. Thank you.
Leon Kilmer, 1531 Kingston Road here in Lincoln. I have a few handouts for you guys because everyone loves handouts. So. First off, thank you for your time today. We are a locally owned and operated business. Pause for Fun, as some of you may not know who we are and what we do. We are Nebraska's first indoor dog park. We're also doing daycare, boarding, grooming, do-it-yourself grooming, indoor pool, outdoor pool, dock diving, dog sports, and training. Yes, it took me about 3 years to get that all down. Our whole point is to revitalize, beautify the neighborhood that we are in, the neighborhood, the community, and the city. We see ourselves as a service for the city, so we want to give back to the city as we work on this. As far as the number of dogs that I came up with, 30 dogs is a large number, and I understand this. This is also a number way more than we are going to use on a daily basis. The reason for this number is for special occasions. We plan on doing dock diving on the weekends, which would not affect daily weekday activities. And during a dock diving event, you have a flight of dogs, so it could be anywhere from 5 to 10 that would be out there jumping into our pool for the competition. Most of the owners will then put their dogs afterwards back into the kennels, but some may elect to keep them out, so we don't want to try and narrow that down. Doing this will also bring in outside revenue from the city. I think the closest one is 250 miles away at Kansas City is the nearest dock diving spot. So we would be able to bring in practice, and for competition we'd be able to bring in for that. As far as barking procedures and the cleaning for the odor, that's the handouts I handed to you. I am trained in animal behavior. If a dog barks, that is the only way that it has to communicate with us. Unfortunately, sometimes this is annoying, as I have 3 dogs and it is annoying to me occasionally. I also know that they bark when they're happy and excited. So 1 or 2 barks is fine. When they hit about 3 or 4, it means they're trying to tell us something. Unfortunately, we don't have any state regulations for kennels for handlers, so I'm going off of other states and their recommendations and their laws and regulations. Mainly Colorado. They have 1 handler per every 10 to 15 dogs is their state law, and that is what I plan to try and uphold in my facility. At most 20 at one time, but anything more than 10 or 15 can be a danger to not only the handlers but also to the other dogs. So as you can see on your handouts, a couple barks in, also we're going to immediately start assessing the situation and take steps, whether it's separating the dogs, distracting them with a toy, taking them inside so they are no longer outside to keep barking, or even separate them into separate rooms inside. It is going to be almost a 30,000 square foot facility. We'll have 2 timeout rooms and 77 boarding suites where we can put them in to relax. When they bark, they're usually overstimulated, overexcited, giving us a warning, so we want to make sure that it doesn't go unheeded and unheard. We are not going to run it like a neighborhood, unfortunately, where some of my neighbors allow their dog to bark at everyone that walks by. But we are going to be on top of that immediately, as not to be a distraction. As far as the cleaning, with the other handout, our cleaning will be done immediately. As soon as there is waste that is provided, we will clean up any solid matter immediately. With the turf that we use, the liquid will pass through. We will then immediately spray down the area that they used and put a bioenzyme that will take care of any biological matter there. At the end of the day, we will then run our sprinkler system that also has the bioenzyme in it, and then a flushing system underneath on the indoor turf that will then immediately flush everything down into the drains. As far as some of the sound with decibels and everything, a barking dog is roughly around 90 to 95 decibels. In comparison, O Street can be anywhere from 70 to 100 decibels depending on the type of day and the vehicles passing by it. Schools also sit around about 75 to 80 decibels, and along with child daycares. So, it's very comparable to what a dog barking once or twice would be. As far as barriers and channeling the sound, we do have our buildings and we will have a 6-foot fence. We are trying to channel the sound up, not out into the neighborhood. We have talked with Dave Meisinger, who is to our immediate north. He owns the building north of us. We are working with him to compromise to make sure that we don't impact any business he would have there. And I've also talked to all the surrounding businesses to express what we are looking to do and trying to compromise and make sure that if there are any complaints, we can handle that immediately and keep all business owners happy. The closest residential is Tanglewood Apartments. That's across the street from us. And they are in support of this. And just closing, I would like to have, I know there's a few objectors that are going to be speaking against this. I welcome it. It's fine. I love this process. But as a favor, if they could give me a number that they are comfortable with for that backyard area, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for your time.
Any questions?
Yes. So, educate me a little bit, if you would, please. Doggy diving. Do owners of the pets participate in
Yes.
events like that?
Yes.
Okay.
To be honest, I didn't know what this was 2 years ago either until some customers brought it towards me. It is about a 8-foot wide dock and 40 feet long. And what they do is they have the dog sit at one end. The owner walks to the other end, gives a command or tells them to come. The dog will then sprint and then jump as far as it can into the water. This is an AKC sponsored event and brings in large revenue. Every year they've been holding one at the Lancaster Event Center. And so we would replace that event with something more central at our location.
Okay. So that is a special event that you would hold
Yes.
on site.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about this outdoor space in your everyday usage in your mind. What does that look like on your
Absolutely.
average Wednesday, no event, just regular course of business?
Absolutely. During fair weather days, we would have one class, one flight of daycare dogs out there, which would be around 10 to 15 dogs on a normal basis. This isn't from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. by any means. It's only for about half an hour, and then we'd have a couple of hours of probably rest in between before we bring another flight out. We're not looking to keep dogs out there all day or even rotate them out, as that would further stress and provide anxiety, which would cause dog noise, obviously.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Under.
I appreciate that you've gone to a neighboring state to look at their regulations, since Nebraska doesn't have them for dog kennels, dog parks. But when you were talking about it, you talked about Colorado having a ratio staff to dog of 1 to 10 to 15, which is a range of 50%. But then you said upwards of 20 on a regular day. So I am curious, is your staff to dog ratio different for outdoor time as opposed to indoor time? And how are you going to accommodate this within a little bit more than, 10 to 20 is a big range.
Right, absolutely. Initially, we're looking at trying to keep it down to one staff member to 20 dogs until we get some revenue and income coming in, so we can then employ more part-time and full-time staff, so then we can bring that number down to a 10 to 15. I anticipate within the first month or so that we can hopefully be able to do that and not be going over that number of 15 at all.
Okay, and then you talked about flights. of dogs?
Yeah,
So-
flights, classes, are you talking about the dock diving or are you talking about the daycare?
The daycare.
The daycare, okay, absolutely. Flight class, depending on how you want to term it, is each group of the doggy daycare. So one handler to 10 to 15 dogs is one flight or one group. And then we would have multiple groups, sometimes one outside, but we would also be using the almost 13,000 square feet of indoor dog park inside most of the time.
Okay, and then on your special events, your dog diving events, how frequently do you expect to host those? How many times a month?
4 times a year.
4 times a year.
Any other questions for Mr. Gilmore? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here wishing to testify in support of this item? Is there anyone here wishing to testify in opposition to this item?
Yes.
Please come forward. Either one of you first, doesn't matter.
Yeah, Ron's going to be first.
Okay.
I will help here for us today, I think. My name is Ron Wilhelm. I live at 1301 Piper Way, Lincoln, Nebraska. I am the adjacent lot owner to the east, and a little help here for us.
CenturyLink Prism on the Go lets you take TV with you. So when you're on the move, your favorite part...
Turn that off, please. Thank
You
you.
want me to turn it off?
Yeah, well, just,
But I can't. If there's a
you
permit,
can turn that off.
you want me to turn this off?
Yes.
Okay. My point being is that if you pass the permit, I can't turn this off. Okay? I would like to proceed with it barking and everything to bring out the point. Is that possible? We could do that?
I don't think
I
it's
think I have an
necessary.
example. I think I
So you don't
understand.
like the noise either?
I think I understand your example.
Okay. So you don't like the noise?
I think I understand your example.
Okay, I'll assume that's a yes. What I like to do is, if you could pass out the exhibits there. I own the lot that's just right east of the back area of sports courts. And one thing that is in their application, that they have property that abuts directly to my property, meaning that is right next to your face, not 15 feet away like what we've got here, okay? My wife and I have owned this property since 1999, and one of the issues of development has always been, well, what's going on over here at sports courts? And you don't know. And so recently, the property was purchased, and of late, fast forwarding this a little bit, in January of this year, we've had a developer that has come forth who is working with the Urban Development Department to look at the entire area of the block of what's in question, 44th Street to 46th, excuse me, from O Street to Q Street and beyond that, but in specific for that area to be rezoned for multi-use. And we're looking at possibly a 4 to 5 story building, which would be lower part being commercial, the upper part being residential. So when we look at the residential and even the commercial use, if you could help guide me through, and I know the people here previously have talked about the 200 feet into 3 animals. Well, what happens if you're 195 feet away? What happens if you're 65 feet away? What happens if you got 4 dogs? This little exhibit was 8. We're talking 30. Okay? We've heard soothing to the ears, we've heard obnoxious. 3 being obnoxious, a whole kennel being soothing. I'm not quite sure where my mind is at, but I know that when you folks have all heard 8, that was something you wanted to shut off. And if that permit is granted, I can't shut it off. In a 4 to 5 story building, if you've got the second floor being residential, and if it's 15 feet away, that's no more than you and I. How are those people able to shut off that sound? This can go on from 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. Okay? I'm not confident with the procedures that the city has of being able to, the rigor of what it is that you have to go through to prove that this thing is wrong. A part of your program and what the staff has put forth here, we're talking about disturbance of the peace. What we're talking about. All of the visuals that you have are talking about space. This is talking about what we hear. Okay? The reason I gave you that exhibit is that the distance of my lot
Could you
from
please finish up your testimony?
east to west is 165 feet. And so you get beyond that 165 feet, you get into other properties. Okay? One thing in conclusion, what's been reported at this point is a 6-foot wall be made. Well, if you're up 10 feet above that in the second floor, that wall is not going to do you a bit of good. Thank you for listening.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So we had a request from the applicant that those in opposition say the number that they might be comfortable with. Is there a number of?
3.
3, so, okay. Thank you.
That's the way the current zoning is, right?
Can you tell me, what is your property zoned right now? Is it H2?
It's H2.
H2.
And we're looking to redo that to commercial, for multi-use.
So your land now is vacant, is that right?
Correct.
So then you're against this because of the development possibility of that?
Correct. Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Commission, my name is Herb Friedman, address 3800 Normal Boulevard, Lincoln. I appear here as a property owner. If you look at the chart, you'll see that this particular property that they want to develop into this dog kennel is in the middle of this 4-block radius. We own property here and here. We're having a hard time renting those now, and we can guarantee you that if we had a kennel there with the sounds that are coming out, as Mr. Wilhelm pointed out, that we won't be able to rent those things. We may as well just put a blight sign on those 2 buildings because they're not going to be rentable. That's for now. What you've got here is noise pollution in the middle of a 4-block area that'll all but impossible to develop that. And we just think that's wrong. And we hope that you take a better look at it. And I've got a handout here that I want to distribute, and it shows we've got a lot of other sounds that I brought, but I don't think I'm going to ask you folks to listen to the sounds of the trains and the diesel engines and the airplane that we've got recorded. But you get the message. This is pollution in the middle of this 4-block area that doesn't do a thing for the best use of that. As Mr. Wilhelm said, we've been discussing this with the developer to try and have a multi-area development there during that, in that 4-block period. We want apartments, we want retail, we want grade A office space. You can't do that there. This is a poison pill in the middle of that 4-block area, and we ask that you take a real strong look at this thing. And as far as the applicant approaching the owners, that simply isn't true. I've owned that property there for years. Nobody ever came and talked to me about it. Nobody ever asked me anything about it. Now all of a sudden he says, well, we want 30 dogs, but gee, maybe we'll take a few less. Well, we don't think that you should grant this. We think that you're inserting a poison pill in the middle of this 4-block area that's going to make redevelopment absolutely impossible. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Friedman?
Yes, the same question.
Yes, Ms. Harrison.
What would you be comfortable with, if any number of dogs?
0.
So-
I don't think that this is the place for that kind of a business. That should be someplace else. This has an adverse impact on that whole 4-block area. 3 maybe, that's what it says now. If they want 3 out there, I guess we could probably live with that. But what we're inviting here is a nuisance suit. We're inviting all kinds of problems with this thing. Any other questions?
Yes, how, you mentioned your existing office buildings there. How full are they right now?
Almost 0.
So they're empty right now?
Well, no, each of them has 1 tenant.
So you're already having problems getting tenants in there?
We've had problems, yes, right. And it's not going to be any better with this way, I can guarantee you.
How long have you been having problems?
Charlie?
Well, both buildings right now are at about 40% to 50% occupancy. And that's one of the reasons why we want to redevelop the whole area.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
They're at approximately 40 to 50% occupancy.
Can you give us your name and address?
My name is Charlie Friedman, 1901 South 25th Street, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68502. One of the issues, we are actually trying to redevelop that whole area into a very feasible grade A office space, an excellent living area. And so we're very concerned about this kind of filtration into this area that would involve primarily sound. So sound that would impact on businesses and sound that would impact on people who are living above the said sound area. So if there's a 6-foot fence and the sound's going up, the people who are above that are going to hear that. And we're very concerned about that kind of quality interfering with tenants and leasers who would be in that area.
Why doesn't your development include this area as well? It's been for sale, or it's been on the market for a long time.
Well, first of all, we're dealing with the area that we primarily own right now. And part B to that is that no one ever came to us and said this dog spa was going to be there. So this guy says that we have all been included. We actually have not been included in his redevelopment for the area. And if we would have been communicated with, then maybe things would be different now. I don't know.
Other questions for the Friedmans?
Can I ask you the same question about the number of dogs? Are you asking that we deny this permit altogether, or are you comfortable with a 3-dog sort of across the board rule?
I actually just have to hear more, so to speak, to know exactly what's going on, because this is the first I've ever heard of this. So I can't say it should be 3, I can't say it should be 0, but I will say I'd like to know more about what these fences do, about how you can control noise in these areas.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here wishing to testify in opposition to these items? We have questions for staff?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe if we could take the chart down, George, if you wouldn't mind doing that. Thank you.
Where do I begin? Okay. First of all, I want to follow up, and please forgive me, I've already forgotten your name. Wilhelm, Mr. Wilhelm's question about if the area that he owns became developed and if a change of zone were to occur, what would happen? Would the kennel then become non-conforming, basically, or what happens in that scenario?
Just to maybe back up a little bit, just to confirm, the zoning, his property is zoned H2 to the east, which under that current zoning designation, residential use is not permitted. So there would have to be a change of zone in order to allow residential use on his property. As far as the question of if residential use would be established after the special permit would be issued, that would be a legal question. I would have to defer to the city attorney unless someone else would be able to help me with that question.
Okay. Well, I just wanted, since the question was asked, I wanted to try and follow up. And then, so can you kind of walk me through the fairness factor of, for me, that's kind of the what's at the heart of this, where if other kennels are abiding by 3, and then we're saying, but these guys can have 30. What's the next step? Is the next step to loosen up the 3 number for everyone, or what? Just across the board, how do we stay consistent on this issue?
Sure. Again, maybe to just back up as far as the question, under the current zoning ordinance, you have kennels as a conditional use for this zoning district. And again, there are 2 conditions that have to be met, the one of which is the 200-foot separation from residential. The other is no more than 3 dogs outside at any time. The current ordinance provides or allows for a special permit to waiver or vary from either of those, subject to Planning Commission approval. So that's the current ordinance. Again, we looked at prior cases to see, have there been any cases where there were more than 3 animals permitted outside? We did not find any cases, but that is a condition or an allowance, if you will, by the ordinance.
But so let's say that we approve this today and other kennel owners come forward asking to be treated in the same way. What kind of is our overall vision for appropriate number as it relates to surrounding development and so on and so forth?
Some of it would be case by case. I mean, we look very closely at the adjoining zoning, the uses nearby, and so there's going to be some degree of variation, most likely from case to case. So it probably would be a case by case analysis.
And when you typically consider a situation when you're looking at those conditions and going beyond, or the special permit issues, I mean, is it our role that we should be looking at it in terms of how the property is now, or with regard to the surrounding areas and the type of changes that might occur as development moves forward? I mean, should we be looking at this in terms of how the zoning is at this time?
I can't speak to the specific plans that the private parties have mentioned. However, the staff report did identify the comprehensive plan designation, which for this whole block east of North 44th is commercial.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
I had one last question. When Mr. and Mr. Friedman said that they hadn't heard about the plans until now, so back when 2 years ago when this was up, would they have been notified, or are they outside of the range of the notification going out to neighbors and such?
I believe the same 200-foot notification should have applied for the change of zone.
Yeah, when it was mentioned, I did go back to look to see the mailing labels, and I didn't see them attached on this report, or on the drop-down. So I can't manage that piece of information well, because I don't see the mailing labels.
As far as the prior change of zone or the current permit?
For the current.
Okay.
And, but of course, for the prior, I wasn't sitting as a commissioner at the time, and I would, of course, be interested to know, to get a record of the mailing labels from a couple of years ago as well. I realize they're not going to be forthcoming in the next 30 seconds, so this might just be curiosity
Commissioner
on my
Washington.
part.
I do believe that they are part of the report, and I do
Where did you
believe-
find them?
On the website of
Okay.
on the staff report. It does appear that Mr. Friedman was
Okay,
notified.
thank you. I guess my questions are similar to Tracy's, because I am curious about how to make a decision based on what might happen in the future. I know what the zone looks like, what the zoning looks like right now. I did not, but I will, as quickly as I possibly can, pull the comp plan to look at what the future comp plan has suggested, or the comp plan has suggested for the near future for that section. So I'm going to pull that right now. Because maybes are hard to make decisions based on.
Steve Henriksen, the Planning Department. On the question of notification, if I might provide clarification, I believe Mr. Friedman was responding to the applicant. The applicant said they had notified people, and he said he hadn't been notified. I assume that meant by the applicant, and not that he was not notified by the city. I mean, we have every reason to believe our labels went out and we got people mailed within the 200 feet. I can try to help address your question in terms of the comp plan. As George noted, this is shown as commercial. Our commercial, in a very broad sense with the comp plan, we always encourage mixed use in a general sense. But of course, we realize there are some areas where a mix of residential uses and commercial uses don't really mix very well. And right now, our H zoning districts, which are kind of the highway commercial, West O is a good example, Cornhusker, we don't allow residential uses in those H districts. So we have some commercial districts where we've said, well, while the comp plan in a broad conceptual sense encourages mixed use when you're H, not yet, that's not one to be done. Doesn't mean the adjacent property might not be rezoned. This property was rezoned. I'd also note when it was rezoned from H2 to B3, it didn't change the rules for kennels at all. Kennels are a conditional use in H2. They're a conditional use in the B3. The change of zone to B3 was really about changing the parking requirement. The parking requirement was different, and that's why they changed it to the B3. And at that time, they knew their limitation was 3 dogs at that point. So that was mostly what we were pointing out with the previous change of zone, is that was the limitation at the time. The change of zone didn't change it. They were changing the zone for other reasons. And we've certainly had other properties, though, in the area rezoned to B3. And B3 does allow residential up above the first floor commercial. So in a larger sense, sure, if other properties came forward in this area to be rezoned from H2 to B3, that would probably be something that could be supported, because this is definitely an area where we have been encouraging a mix of residential and commercial, unlike the West O Street. I mean, you have apartments in R5 zoning immediately across the street to the west.
And that's the closest residential right now, currently, to the west, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, would it be fair to say that we give priority to existing zoning, or the applicant that comes first? I don't know how to word that very well.
Certainly, it is very legitimate to look at what are the impacts on the existing uses that are there. They're legally there by right. Certainly, anytime there's a piece of vacant property, We also try to take into account what would the zoning allow for that as well. So if this was next to R5 zoning, if the Freedman's vacant property was R5, we'd have a very different report. We'd say, well, hold it, even though it's vacant today, they have the legal right to go build apartments, and so the impact would be completely different. So just the fact that it's vacant doesn't mean you disregard what they have the legal right to do. But we also think it's important that you take into account that there are existing businesses who have been out there as well. And you need to consider the impact of this noise compared to other noise that might be generated by commercial uses.
One last question. Can I bounce off of you the possibility and the wisdom of maybe making some kind of compromise where we're limiting the across the board number of dogs outside, but we allow for these special events that may create positive buzz for the neighborhood? You know, so we allow a larger number when they're doing this dog diving thing that I just learned about for the first time. But that we're bringing the number down a little bit on a regular day.
That is certainly your role, to take the staff report and all of the testimony, and in your discussion to decide, do you want to have an interim step, have a certain amount of lower ones on a daily basis? We're not aware of special event changes in the noise. I think if you are going to go to that degree, either one, you need to be very specific about how many of those it would be, or potentially decide you want to have this postponed for 2 weeks so that you can get additional information on how that might be handled.
I have a question for the applicant based on.
We'll get, the applicant will be next.
Yeah, I want to put that out there so that I don't forget it either, so.
Anything else, Tom?
Not necessarily with kennels, but anything relating, George, to keeping animals within the city. Is there anything, I don't think there is, but is there anything that correlates number of animals to square footage in terms of keeping animals anywhere else in the city in any sort of other capacity? I don't think that there's on the residential side, there's just numbers, right? There's not a square footage component?
That's my understanding, but I might defer to Steve Beal with the Health Department.
Steve Beal, Lincoln Animal Control. There is for people that are getting permits for fowl. So if you have chickens in your backyard, you have a certain amount of square footage. You have a certain set off from neighbor's property that you have to follow. And so in Lincoln, you can own fowl. You can get a permit, chickens, geese, even a turkey. You can get permits for rabbits. You can get other things. And there are square footage limits on that, but not necessarily for dogs and cats.
Okay. And then for the residential component with dogs, it's just a number of dogs per resident?
Maximum of 3 dogs.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate it.
Any other questions? Thank you. Applicant rebuttal?
I'll try to make this quick. Just a rebuttal to some of the things that were said with Ron, with his lot being right next to ours. It is empty. It has been empty for 18 years that he has owned it. It has been empty before it was before he owned it, as far as I know. So he's had 18 years to develop it and hasn't done anything with it. Another point is that we were part of the discussion with the development of this area. Problem is they came to us at the beginning of this year once we had already started deconstruction. We gave them a set amount of time of 2 months in order to come get approval from the mayor to get the land blighted, and then come before the planning commission and then the city council. Their entire development relies on a TIF. If the TIF isn't approved, it's not going to go through, and that's what they've told me. Unfortunately, we were so far into demolition that by the time my deadline was done, they came to me and said they hadn't even been to the mayor yet. I can't hold off construction when I already have a $3 million loan that I'm paying interest on. Also with that development, Ron's lot will be a parking lot. There is talk of maybe changing the north part of it, but the majority of the original plans, his lot was just a parking lot. It wasn't going to have any buildings on it, as there are city easements on the east side that I know of on that one. For Herb, I apologize that I didn't come to you personally. I did approach all the businesses, though, that were in the immediate area, that were in his his buildings, the 2 dentist office, the salon, the Asian Cultural Center, all the businesses to the north in Christie's building, Tanglewood Apartments, Sherwin-Williams, Kingery Construction, Taco Bell, the Mobile Assist. I talked to everyone in the immediate area. In fact, I went 6 blocks all the way over to the lighting over on 40th Street, just so they knew what we were doing. If they had any questions about who we were, what we were doing, or why we were asking for a special permit, they could give me a call. As far as the playing of recordings, you can adjust your sound on that. I mean, I can sit here and put a quiet recording up to a microphone and amplify that by a lot. As far as the B3 with special permits, while there are none, as they said, B4 does not need a special permit. Woof, that operates downtown at 20th and P, is a B4, and they have no limit on how many dogs they can have outside. And I'm sure they aren't the only ones, because there are numerous other ones with Pet Care Center up in the northwest area, Bailey's down on 25th and Nebraska Highway, and Camp Bow Wow. They all can have more than 3 dogs out, and obviously haven't had complaints on them about that.
Any questions?
On the special events, the dog divings. So presently, those are held at the Lincoln Lancaster Event Center.
Yes,
or
they
the
were.
Lancaster Event
Yes.
Center. So, that's a very large place. They're used to lots of animals. You can make a lot of noise out there.
Yes.
How many people do you expect at your events? Not just the dogs, but how many people? How many spectators, cars?
Our target is 200 to 300 participants.
That's a lot.
Yes. But we do have a large indoor facility where most of the dogs will be housed at when they aren't competing at the time.
And parking? That's 200, it's about 150 cars?
Correct. There is a current easement with the north building for parking that allows us to use that parking lot also.
Thank you.
Just a quick note, I'm sorry, Tom, for your question about square footage. The national average is around 70 to 100 square feet per dog.
For exercise or keeping?
For exercise.
Okay.
In a daycare facility.
Okay.
So being 30,000 square feet, our outdoor area would be 1,800 is 8,008 square feet, and then once you take out the 1,800 square feet of the pool, according to those numbers, we could actually fit 62 dogs in that area. But obviously, we're not asking for that. Also, with the noise complaints, Tanglewood Apartments has an outdoor dog area right across the street. And I assume no one's objected to dogs being out in that residential area, obviously barking and not supervised like ours would be.
Okay. Follow-up questions actually
Absolutely.
to that. Your architect is here?
Yes, Don Schleining.
I would have a question, if possible. The site plan hi.
My name's Don Schleining. I office at 857 South 48th here in Lincoln.
Thank you very much. The site plan that was submitted along with the application is showing the outdoor park at about 2,700 square feet or so, I believe. And then the dock diving pool at about just shy of 2,900 square feet in totality, I believe.
I think that's the current pool that's in place.
Okay.
There's an existing from the Sports Courts project, and we're working on a revised plan to reduce the size of that. It's going to be the same length, but it will be considerably narrower.
Will the size of the pool change?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
To accommodate the animals, because they don't need the width that humans need for their run and jump.
Okay. So we're looking at usable exercise area of 5,000 square feet. What maximum? 4,500, more likely?
It depends on how you want a usable area, how the
Sure.
pool cuts out of that at the width versus the length.
Yeah, I'm not
dimension.
going to count the pool as a usable exercise area necessarily. I'm just trying to get to where an animal could actually run, play, exercise, what have you. Now, here's the odd question. You're an architect. I'm assuming you know somewhat about best practices, maybe not in dog parks, but did you happen to research anything in terms of dog play, best practices, what a dog may need per square foot in order to really work in its maximum efficiency?
Most of what we researched was based on other planning departments in the United States, because when we worked on this initially in 2015, the parking was the big issue. And so we had to take a look at who's done these, what are the issues and so forth. So we selected, I think it was 3 cities the size of Lincoln. One of them was Roseville, California. And they had a fairly extensive planning report on that one. And we far exceeded on the interior portion of it what the ratio was, because you're looking at 2 large dog spaces, 125 feet in length and 40 feet wide. That just happens to coincide with the size of 6 indoor handball courts. So we repurpose that kind of space. There are also 2 1,230 square foot small dog runs. Now, specifically to the outdoor question, we didn't look at that in detail because the planning staff reports did not include that. They were focused on the interior. And they also did make, in one instance, I think it was in Indiana, they did have a planning staff report that had the same kind of approach to dog noise control by having staff be very specific in their handling and the number of dogs. And I can't bring the number of dogs to mind at this point. I let Leon control that once they had that information.
As far as what dogs need and everything, I do attend 4 or 5 national conferences for the past 3 years that involve daycare and boarding businesses. One's International IBPSA, International Boarding and Pet Services Association, APDT, which is Association of Professional Dog Trainers, and Boarding and Pet Services magazine. They have one on the East Coast in Hershey, and then the West Coast in California, where actually I just was last week. So I discuss with everyone else that owns or runs daycares and boarding facilities on best practices, what has worked for them and what hasn't worked for them. We also have a mentor in Portland, Oregon. She ran Fido's indoor dog park, and she has been an immense help on, cleaning practices, noise practices, how to get dogs in and out of places and everything. We're not doing this just off the seat of our pants. This has been 3 years in the planning and a lot of research and help with it.
Thank you both.
Thanks.
Maya?
You talked about a time crunch and all that. Taking that into account, would you be comfortable with deferring this to get a little more consensus?
Absolutely.
And maybe figuring out a way to not have 30 outside across the board before your special event?
But like I said, that's going to be extreme rare occasions for that. And in addition to that, I mean, it's the possibility of renting out the pool for a birthday party, where, I mean, all of you bring your dogs, and then you bring 10 of your closest friends, and all of a sudden, there's 20 dogs, but I can only have 15 outside. How do I explain to the client that you have to pick 5 of those dogs you can't bring? Like I said, that number, anything above 15 is going to be a rare occasion for any practices that we do.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you. We have one item. I'd entertain a motion.
Move approval, Core.
Second, Shear.
Discussion.
So is that, should I take that as
That's just a move of approval.
okay, so I will just state that I would feel a lot more comfortable deferring for the, I fear that I can't make a very informed decision today because I feel like a compromise is in order here between the neighbors and the applicant, but I'm not sure exactly what that looks like, and I'd hate to do it on the fly. I would probably be more generous in my vote if I could have a little more time to work it out.
Others?
I struggle with the fact that there's not necessarily a guiding principle in terms of this particular circumstance with dogs as there are with perhaps other animals that we shelter within the city. I don't know that, for example, that there shouldn't be going forward a look at a certain number of dogs that can be sheltered in an outdoor exercise area per square foot of said exercise area. I think that that's probably a reasonable standard to look at in the future. I, too, am uncomfortable working off the fly here a little bit. 30, I will admit, sounds like a lot to me. I don't know that that number should be 3, however. So I am torn. The flip side of that, though, is that I'm not sure what additional information that would help me in my decision-making process in the next couple of weeks. And I'm not sure that those opposed to the application are interested in a compromise at all. For lack of anything better, I'm going to have to go with my gut here, and I think 30 is a little high for me. I would feel much more comfortable at 20, no more than.
Others?
I think, like my colleagues, I share some concern that making a decision today, I'm making it on only, some of the information. I would rather have more information. I think that there is a compromise. I would like to have some more consideration. I'd like to look at a lower number than 30 or some other parameter, but to add some other parameter today off the cuff feels not wise.
Others?
I'm fine with allowing 30. I think that this is the second time that I've seen this applicant before the commission, and I'm impressed with how neighborly he is and how well thought out his plan is. And I think that dogs tend to have some characteristics of humans. Stick with me here. And it really comes to mind because last night I was sitting out in my backyard, and the neighbor, she has a young son. She had some friends over, and the kids were playing. I'll tell you, sorry to my neighbor, but I'd prefer to hear the dogs on the other side than the kids that were playing because they were constantly in trouble and all that kind of stuff. But what I'm getting at here is the personality of the dogs. They have personalities just like humans. So while her child is normally very quiet, you add some other kids in there that might not be, and that's all what having that handler is about, and they have some policies that they've developed, separating the dogs, that kind of thing, and I think they're well thought out. And I do kind of disagree with Mr. Wilhelm that you can turn it off, because if it is a problem, you put your complaint in and due process will happen. I've also been a part of that in my neighborhood where, it's not a business, but I think that there are sufficient parameters in place that if this is a problem, there is a way to deal with it.
Others?
I do. Do you want to say anything?
Go ahead.
Okay. I have 3 or 4 points I just want to make, and some of my colleagues have made a few of these. I am also impressed with the applicant's knowledge of this subject and your willingness to become even more knowledgeable about it, and your desire to operate a facility properly. So I think that's sort of the overriding kind of thought that I have about this. I probably would not change my vote from today to if we deferred this 2 weeks from now or had more time. I think that we're in a situation here where the owner The applicant is in the process of trying to implement a plan that we have assisted him in 2015 to start. This is another step in that direction. I think that we do have to be very cognizant and aware and respectful of the existing zoning that is occurring in this part of our city. And in addition to that, and probably just as important or more important, the direction that the comprehensive plan is giving to this area of our city. And when you put those two things together, this is a use and a operation that fits. We do have 2 letters of support from business owners that are in this area that, as I said, supportive of this direction. We have people in opposition of an idea that is in the future and speculative. To achieve the vision of those who are opposed, a lot of change to zoning and other things, maybe not contrary to the comprehensive plan, but certainly not any more in compliance with what is going on now with our existing application. A lot of things would have to happen. So put all that together, and to simplify it in my mind, I think that we have what's before us, something that makes sense for now and for what the comprehensive plan is directing us to do in the future.
Thanks. Tracy?
Much of what has been said reflects my thinking on this. I do not believe I know my vote would not change between now and the next time we review this. I'm very impressed with the plan that's been brought forward by the applicant and the thought and the foresight that went into it. And I do believe that the circumstances that we have in place and the due process that would be involved can handle situations and concerns as they come up. And I would support this motion.
I'm also going to support the motion. I'm impressed by my colleagues and how they verbalize it, because I've agreed and have got those written down. I'm not sure if a compromise could really be made if Mr. Friedman says that 0 dogs is acceptable outside. And I don't think there's any other additional information that's available. We have to look at the facts as they are right now, and the comp plan does support this, as Dennis said. And at this point, there's undeveloped property, and there's an idea of a plan that hasn't been exercised yet. And the fact it can be turned off, Ron. You can call, you can make a complaint, and you can get the dogs to turn off if that's an issue. So with that, Jerry, please call the vote.
Okay, the motion was for approval. Staff recommendation is conditional approval. Correct, okay. Beckius?
No.
Core?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Harris?
No.
Washington?
No.
Shear?
Yes.
Hove?
Yes.
Motion failed for lack of majority vote. 4-3. We need 5 to move this forward.
So we need to call a motion. Do you want to call a motion to defer?
Yes. Move to defer for 2 weeks.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Anybody want to comment on that?
I'm glad that we're deferring, but I wanted to know if deferral is the right, since we just turned down a motion, are we deferring, or are we asking them to please come back?
No, the motion on the floor now is for deferral.
Even after we've turned down this permit?
It just failed to have an action one way or the other.
Failed to have an, thank you.
Yes, and just want to clarify, do you want to continue the public hearing or have the public hearing be closed and just have a vote only in 2 weeks?
What do folks think?
New information only.
New information only?
It's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
So continue the public hearing.
Okay. The motion is for deferral with new information only. We do have a second. Is that correct? Jerry, please call the vote.
Okay, Beckius?
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Shear,
Yes.
Hove.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Okay, next item under public hearing is 4.2, text amendment number 17008, amending Articles 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 20, and 22 to the Lancaster County zoning regulations, including but not limited to amendments to the definitions, AGR district, AGR AG district, AGR district, R district, B district, special permits, and changing church to place of religious assembly throughout the zoning regulations, and repealing said articles as hitherto existing. Our staff recommendation is for approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this application?
I see none. Tom?
Tom Chaka, planning staff. We are the applicant.
Could you please keep it down, sir? Sir? Could you please take it outside, please?
Yes, I'll leave. I have a doctor's appointment, I'm sorry. I have to tell my wife.
Thank you.
Um,
Sorry about that.
That's fine. First off, I have a motion to amend on the staff report. I think you all have a copy of that. It is to delete section 4.005D, which hopefully is page 83. This is to delete public uses out of conditional uses. Under the section here, actually, they don't cite any conditions, so don't know what the conditions would be. And it's also redundant because public uses are included under permitted uses. So that was one I didn't catch after going through this 10 times. This basically is a set of proposed text amendments to the Lancaster County zoning regulations. The revisions are for reformatting, adding definitions, clarification of unclear terms, updating terminology, and specifying zoning districts in the special permit chapter. I'm not going to go through all 80 plus pages of here, but I want to hit some of the highlights. In definitions, some of the things we're trying to use more current terminology, like replacing the term churches and changing that to places of religious assembly to be more all-encompassing. We're also like changing the term nursing home to healthcare facility and breaking those up into healthcare facility, residential, and non-residential, similar to what the city zoning ordinance has. We tried to match a lot of the definitions to be the same as what's in the city zoning ordinance for consistency. There's also a lot of definitions that were put in that the health department requested for that have to do with commercial composting operations. That's in the definition. That's Article 2. In Article 3, there was some old language in there that said that you didn't have to have a building permit or occupancy permit for houses if it was on 20 acres or more. That's actually been required since 2002, so we wanted to clean up that language to be consistent. One of the other ones that under conditional use in the AG chapter, we've added a few conditions to a farm winery to make it more clear as to what a farm winery is, and that people couldn't say they're a farm winery when, in essence, what they really want to be is a social hall. So we're trying to tighten that up a little bit. And those conditions were sent out to all of the farm wineries in Lancaster County and also to the Nebraska Wine Growers Association. Did not have any negative response from any of those. Another one was currently you can have a amusement license once a year in the county. We wanted to add in there that places of religious assembly would be exempt from that once a year rule, because oftentimes they'll have maybe 3 or 4 fundraisers during the year, and we didn't want to limit them to just one. Special permit chapter, well, before I go there, also in the ag district, there came to our knowledge that there has been some problems about frontage being enforced in the past. Up until probably a couple of years ago, well, let me back up a little bit. Zoning code says to build a house under AG zoning, you have to have 20 acres and 550 feet of frontage. Prior to 2002, you didn't have to get a building permit for a house on 20 acres. So people would just go out and build, and nobody knew whether they had frontage or didn't have frontage. And it wasn't enforced. In 2002, the rules changed and said you had to have building permits, and zoning was enforced. So what happened was, prior to 2002, people went out and created a whole lot of parcels. Well, now they didn't have frontage, or they had less than 550 feet of frontage. In the interim, between 2002 and say 2015, 16, basically the frontage rule of the zoning code was just ignored. About a year ago or two, county attorney's office informed Building and Safety and County Board that you can't just ignore the zoning regulation, and that frontage issue has been enforced. Well, the problem has arisen that we have a lot of parcels out there that don't meet this, this requirement, and we don't want them to be, well, now you can't build. So we're adding this language to say, if you had a parcel of 20 acres or more created before January 1, 2017, the frontage issue requirement will not apply, to try and clean up that issue. But from here on out, it applies. Probably the biggest change is in the special permit chapter, Article 13. Previously, it said any special permit could be done in any district, just as long as you got the special permit. We didn't think that was good to have the opportunity for certain uses, like in a residential district. We went through all of the special permits, designated which district those apply to. In the community unit plan chapter, currently, if you do a community unit plan under the AG district, to do lots of 3 to 5 acres, which the community unit plan wants you to do, you would have to ask for waivers to lot area, setbacks, frontage, et cetera, et cetera. And those are routinely asked for and routinely approved. So instead of having to do that every time, we're recommending that in an AG district that you would automatically get to use the height and area regulations of the AGR district, which AGR district is a minimum lot size of 3 acres. In Article 22, we changed the requirement for advertising in a newspaper from 8 days prior to the public hearing to 5 days. Our goal is to still keep that at 8 days, but we had on occasion in the past where there was a problem with the newspaper not getting it put in time, and then whatever application was there at that time had to be deferred for 2 weeks so that they could be notified, and we're hoping this will solve that issue. We're also removing a few special permits that have never been applied for in close to 40 years. Some of those are outdoor movie theater, roadside stands in the R district. Well, a couple of them we're recommending removal even though they've been applied for one time. One's a government landfill operation, which if it's government, most likely they're exempt from zoning anyways. And parking lots in the AG and AGR district. With that, I'll take any questions.
Questions for Tom? Maya?
So the things that you're removing now, will that create or special permits that you're removing, or that you can't just have a special permit in any district? Does that create non-conforming special permit holders at all?
No, I don't believe so. We went through and looked at, I mean, I didn't go through the county and see where every special permit is, but.
So there's no use that's becoming non-conforming through this
I don't believe
ordinance
so.
change?
I mean, I did go through and look at special permits in the county and which ones were applied for and how many times, and that's where we determined the ones that were never applied for are just one or two. I suppose there's a special permit, I can think of one off the top of my head. There is a special permit that was issued for a parking lot in an AG district. A parking lot was never built, however. I'm not sure, I'd have to ask the attorney if they could still do that special permit even if we remove it from the AG district.
Yeah, if it's still a valid permit, I'd be interested to hear
I
the answer.
would think so. I would think they could still do it because was approved at the time.
It would be great to get the answer to that. Then, also wondering, it looked like you were removing riding stables.
No, I think
delete public building, it's page 5 at the top there, and then riding stables and private stables.
I'm actually moving and under AG district, if you look at page 82, I'm moving riding stables to permitted use.
Okay, so they will still be permitted?
Yes.
They're not one of the uses that would become non-conforming?
No, it'd be a permitted use.
Okay, great. And then lastly, there was on page 6, it talks about changes to section 13.032 with expanded home occupations, or I guess home occupations. I was wondering, does that, I think you had either Avalon or Hillside back in the day, and we had a lot of confusion on those applications going back and forth, and what does this mean, and so does this address some of those issues that we dealt with then?
Right, this is, we revised the language to try to clarify more of what an employee is.
Okay.
Other questions?
I'm going to kind of piggyback off of that one because I had it on my list as well. So you changed it to, or you're proposing to change it to a person that participates in the home occupation. When we're dealing with those event center type situations, is that, so are you considering like the caterer or the beverage provider, is that a contractor, or you consider them participating in the home occupation? How?
They would be considered participating in the home occupation. Now, what we did say is if you're just a delivery person, you're just delivering flowers and dropping them off and leaving, that would not be considered a person participating. If you're there actually.
Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit. What if they're setting up the flowers, the
You're
centerpieces and
reading my
stuff.
mind.
I mean,
If they're setting up and are gonna be there, then yes, they would be considered participating.
so that's kind of the line that you're establishing.
Because we didn't want people that are like, FedEx delivery people be
Right.
considered employee.
Right, or just delivering flowers. The issue before was the line between employee and independent contractor, and it was really impossible to enforce that through building and safety, and the amount of work that was going to go into determining how many angels dance on a pinhead was kind of impossible and just not necessary. Our real intent with that language, from what I can tell, was to limit how many people were working on site, regardless whether they're employees or independent contractors. So we tried to just get rid of the technical language and get back to participation and just work on site.
Okay.
Can you just introduce yourself for the record?
Dave Durbin, Deputy County Attorney, Lancaster County Attorney's Office. Thank you.
Could you please address the special permit question about if there's a valid permit but they haven't done it, as long as the permit's still in place, can they still do that use even though it's been removed?
Yeah, assuming that there's no time frame, I haven't looked at the permit to see what's actually on file. Assuming that it's recorded and it's been issued, I don't see how we would revoke it without going through the normal procedures for revoking a permit.
And are there any applications for permits of that kind right now that would be
No.
affected? No.
Any other questions?
Yep, I got a whole bunch. Sorry. Can you tell me, I tried to find this and I could not, what is an amusement license?
Amusement license is basically when you want to have some sort of large public gathering. Actually, trying to think of one off the top of my head. You've heard of Froggy Fest?
Okay.
Froggy Fest has to have an amusement license. You can do it in the county, it doesn't matter what your zoning is, and you can have those one time per year.
Unless you're a place of religious worship.
That's one of the,
So basically like bands or some other kind of event, kind of like a fundraising event for a church.
yes.
It's anything that that would be inviting the public. So it's under the roadhouse statutes, which are not the clearest set of statutes in the world, that allows the county to require an amusement license for those kind of uses. So they're generally for roadhouses, public amusements. Again, they're not particularly well spelled out, but then we have additional regulations under the zoning text where we had limited those to one per year, although that's not limited by statute.
Okay. So right underneath that in the staff report, you talk about 4.007 and that permitted special uses. So I just wanted to clarify so that I could understand this better. You have the trailer court and the mobile home court on there. So you're saying that they would not, those type of uses would not be allowed at all in AG?
Correct.
Okay. My next question. Hold on, gotta get my pages back in order. I had some problems wrapping my mind around this 6.003. So Article 6 of the residential. I know that the community buildings, you're kind of changing that to be called a social hall now.
Correct.
But it says you're adding a recreational facility as a permitted use. And so I'm just kind of debating in my mind, how is a recreational facility going to be different than a social hall and how it affects the neighbors? It was page 4 of the.
Right. If you look at the definition, recreational facilities usually apply to more athletic events and outdoor fields.
Mm-hmm.
Like the definition talks about facilities primarily for athletic activities, where a community hall would be more social gatherings where you would have, you know, you might have a wedding reception or a birthday party or such a thing. And we did add, because there was not a definition, we have added a definition for social hall in the definition chapters, which I'll just read it. It's short. Social hall shall mean a building or premise available for rent on a daily basis to be used for social, educational, or civic gatherings, including but not limited to charitable fundraising events, wedding receptions, family reunions, educational seminars, or similar events. I believe, I'm pretty sure that's the same language as in the city zoning code, same definition.
So, and I had looked up all those definitions too. So I guess what I'm asking is, both recreational facility and social halls are allowed now in this residential section.
I think that's correct. Well, I'm adding recreational facility as a permitted use in residential. It's not in there now. And that was a little confusing too, because, and the residential district did allow community buildings. We're getting rid of the term, if I remember right, we're getting rid of the term community buildings and replacing it with social hall.
So you're saying,
like I said, I guess.
So you're saying you're gonna, so here's how I interpret this. You're saying, okay, social halls can't be in residential, but it's okay to have a recreational facility in residential.
I think I look at it this way from a land use impact.
Well, and that's how I'm saying I don't understand how the land use impact would be different between the two, because you're gonna have a lot of people attending either one of these places. So how can we say one is okay in residential and one isn't?
Because in most cases, a recreational facility would be
They're
say,
coming
some
to
kind of an athletic field,
play
a baseball
games,
field.
watch games, you're gonna have spectators.
And you have parks and sometimes baseball fields or outdoor fields within a residential neighborhood. I don't think you usually have buildings that are to house 100+ people for some type of social event in a residential setting.
Other questions? You still have more questions?
I think that's my last one.
Okay. Anyone else? Thanks, gentlemen. Are we the applicant here, or? Okay. Is there anyone here wishing to testify in support of these items?
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Eckert with Civil Design Group here in Lincoln, 8535 Executive Woods Drive, Suite 200. I just wanted to come up and as you know, many of you know, our firm does a lot of work for private developers, so we submit a lot of special permits, change of zones, various things, and many of which are in the county. And Tom highlighted some of those things in the county. And so I just wanted to come up and express my thanks to the planning staff for working on this. It's not very often that they get that from the general public when they're doing this, what might be viewed as a monotonous task of cleaning up code issues. But it is really helpful on our end. It is really helpful to our clients so that we understand things better, and some things that might be confusing or removed, and they always do a good job of, I think, in working on these things, whether the times are slow or times are busy, they take these things on. And so this is a big step and a good step, and I'm just fully supportive and wanted to come express my appreciation to them.
Any questions? You feel this will clean up things and make it more efficient for the
Yes,
process?
several other things in the county, and then a few things in the city. And as Tom mentioned, some of them were they're just not used very often. And so, yeah, I think it's all worthwhile.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify in support of these items? Is there anyone here wishing to testify in opposition of these items? Do we have any other questions for staff? Anything else? And no rebuttals, so I'd entertain a motion.
Move approval, core.
Second, Beckius.
Discussion?
Does that include the amendment?
Oh, yes, sure.
Okay.
Move approval as amended by staff.
Can you
Thank
accept
you.
that?
Yes.
Thank you. Discussion?
Having worked as a planner in the past, I want to agree with the last person who spoke that it is tedious, particular work to go through sets of regs and proofread them 10 times and make changes. So thank you for doing that detailed work.
Yes, thank you, Tom.
Anyone else? Obviously, I'm going to support the motion. I think it's a good cleanup and appreciate all the work that's been done to get it done, and it helps both the planning department and the public to understand it better. So, Jerry, please call the vote.
Okay, Beckius?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I've got Edgerton,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Shear,
Yes.
Hove.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Okay, I just want to reiterate that the applicant for agenda items 5A and 5B, county change of zone number 17005 and county preliminary plat number 17003 have been withdrawn.
At this time, anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda may do so. With that, we're adjourned.